Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 764 for the 28th of May, 2023. Richard Saunders coming to you this week from, well, near San Francisco. On this week's episode, I journeyed to San Francisco with Dr. Eugenie Scott in search of dinosaurs. Yes, a couple of weeks ago on the show, we were in the Tyrrell Museum, the Royal Tyrrell Museum of Paleontology in Canada. This week, in the United States, we head to San Francisco to the Academy of Sciences in Golden Gate Park. And we look for the world's largest dinosaurs. Sauropods and more coming up at the top of the show. After that, I catch up with my old friend Susan Gerbic, who was in the Bay Area to give a workshop in Berkeley, which was very interesting indeed. And I chat to Susan about all sorts of things, including her YouTube channel, where she looks at so-called psychics. After that, it's the Book of Tim, and Tim reads a report about mass hysteria. Then to round off the show, as recorded in Skookum Studios in Calgary, the Trove segment looks at lake monsters. It's the weekend. It's the weekend around the world. Normally, though, I know people really like the fact that Fridays come around. Well, they come around at least once a week. If you're the sort of person who appreciates Friday afternoon especially, I'm thinking about you. Why not? But now it's time for me to run downstairs and have, I think, a roast beef and cheese sandwich. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Dinosaurs, yes, I can't get enough of dinosaurs. A couple of weeks ago I was in Canada looking at dinosaurs at the Royal Tyrrell Museum of Paleontology in Calgary. Today I'm in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, where the museum here is putting on a wonderful exhibition of giant dinosaurs. I'm with somebody who needs no introduction. It's Dr. Eugenie Scott. Hi, Jeannie.
Hi there.
We are amongst the dinosaurs, Jeannie. Look at this. We've got a long
Argentinosaurus.
Yeah, it's sauropod.
Or parts thereof, I should
parts
say.
thereof.
Very long neck and face, but you know, it's a visiting exhibit, so they're not going to have everything here. But they've got a part of a sauropod leg over there, which is about the size of a two-story building. So
yeah,
it's moving right along.
Well, I do like this one because I'll just walk over here underneath. It's a reconstruction of a sauropod, the long neck and the head. It gives you a true idea of the actual scale of these things.
Yeah, you don't have to watch Jurassic Park. You can just come here.
I'm astonished. The mouth itself and the teeth are tiny compared to the rest of it, which meant it would have to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Not harvesting the food, munching the food. What's the word I'm looking for?
Grazing, browsing.
Grazing,
browsing.
Thank you. Most of its time, because the sheer size of this beast to keep it going.
Oh, yeah. These guys had to eat a lot. And that means because they're eating low-calorie food, by and large, that means that they're eating most of the time that they're awake. Yeah. On the other hand, size is very adaptive if you want to avoid predators. Because once you get, past the hatchling stage, and we do know that many, if not most, dinosaurs did take care of their young, so there would be some protection. But once you got, past the size of a small car, you didn't have to worry so much about
this
predators.
Thing, worrying about predators? No. I mean, predators would go and look for something else, right?
Anything older than an adolescent doesn't have to worry a lot about predators.
Well,
but you do have to worry about eating.
You do. And this is only the first room here in the exhibition, so we'll march around the corner into another hall where we are confronted with another sauropod, 1-to-1 scale model, the full body, which is quite fascinating. And it's been segmented. In other words, parts of it have been cut away so we can see the veins running up the neck, the esophagus, and some of the muscle structure. What a fascinating exhibition. And as you can probably hear, there are many, many children here today, which is a very good sign, a very good thing to see indeed. I'm now standing underneath a recreation of the lungs of a sauropod dinosaur, and needless to say they are enormous. And we follow from the lungs, we follow the windpipe. I'm walking along the length of the windpipe. I'm still walking, I'm still walking, I'm still walking. Last I've come to the end of the windpipe where there is a model of the heart of a sauropod, and it's practically about a metre from top to bottom, maybe almost a metre. And needless to say again, it is enormous. But this model of the sauropod they have before us, this full-scale model with various bits of the body cut away so you can see the bone structure, the muscle structure, the various, where you can see the esophagus and the windpipe, the muscle structure of the legs. It's a wonderful display, and certainly giving me a much better understanding of how these creatures were put together. Jeannie Scott has joined me to gaze upon this interesting dinosaur, and what I didn't notice before is on the belly of the beast,
so to speak,
they've got a little video display with
descriptions of the creature. Yeah. One side is it's a nice. I'm getting a lot of appreciation of this exhibit. I mean, I'm really into museums anyway, and I really have a perhaps more than critical eye toward how well a museum display is done. And so far, I've been impressed with this one. I think it's a good job. This particular model of a sauropod has a reconstruction on one side, and then the side that we're looking at is a cutaway, as it were. You see the muscles on the outside, you see the bones on the inside, and you kind of get an idea of the blood and guts. And then the little video that Richard was just describing shows things like internal organs and digestive systems and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. And there's a little, further information about respiration, digestion, and so forth. Nice.
So far, I must say I'm very impressed. In all honesty, it's not a huge exhibition. There's one room over there, and there's the main room we're in now. But for what it's worth, it's very good.
Well, traveling exhibits are usually not huge. This is a traveling exhibit. It's not permanent. So, they have to be small enough to pack up and move on to the next exhibit. So, yeah, the world of traveling exhibits is fascinating. A place where you and I have been several times, the Exploratorium, kind of specializes in producing traveling exhibits. They produce a lot of exhibits that then are shipped to museums all over the world, some of which remain there as permanent displays, but some travel, like this sauropod display is. I don't know who put this one out. This is my first time seeing it, but it's, what I've seen so far is impressive. If it comes near you, check it out.
Absolutely.
Richard and Jeannie say check it out.
Yeah,
right?
It's got our seal of approval. It really has. If you're in the Bay Area while it's here, absolutely check it out. Now, there's a very interesting display here talking about how for a sauropod with an extremely long neck, how this is really a way to conserve energy when grazing, because all the sauropod has to do is stand in the one location more or less, and it can graze a huge sweep of area. If you imagine a compass drawing out a circle with the sauropod sort of pivoting on one end, that meant that it didn't have to keep walking and walking to graze. It could stay in the one spot more or less and swing its neck around, and would have an enormous area of vegetation from which to graze. I never knew. It's interesting, Jeannie, one of the information panels we're looking at here has a nice illustration of a sauropod, but it has markings like a giraffe down its neck and along the back and along the tail, which may well have been the case. We just don't know.
We do know from some fossils that we have of dinosaur skin that there were colorful markings on the skin. Nothing has been found that completely replicates this drawing. This drawing is still fanciful, but
yes.
It's not outside of the realm of possibility.
Absolutely not. No,
it's fun.
The red part on the head here, and sure, why not?
We do know that dinosaur skin had colors. It had stripes. I think there's even some evidence of some patches. So go ahead, be creative, artist. give us your ideas.
Another interesting display here is a recreation of a dinosaur nest with a group of about 9 or 10 eggs, and one is already hatched into a little dinosaur sitting in the nest. Isn't it fascinating how over the centuries, millennia, eons, that the same themes reoccur in nature? A nest with eggs, and undoubtedly a mother or father looking after the young. The world's largest dinosaurs, a major exhibition on view at the California Academy of Sciences from May 26, 2023 to January the 21st, 2024. Find out more at calacademy.org.
Told me that aliens really exist. You met them and swooned with the...
Sziasztok!
Hallo!
Hejsan!
Did you know the European continent is home to almost 750 million people living in 50 different countries, belonging to an even greater number of ethnicities?
And believe it or not, only a handful of them list English as the first or at least one of the official languages.
And there's an amazing amount of skeptical activism going on out there that you are not aware of because it's not in English.
Yeah, because pseudoscience, quackery and fake news do not stop at borders. They get translated to other languages and transferred across the whole world.
So, if you're interested in weekly updates on what's going on in some of the countries here, providing you with all the interesting facts, news and even some skeptical history...
Or if you want to hear interviews in English with brilliant people you sometimes haven't even heard about...
Then what you need is to subscribe to the ESP.
Extrasensory perception. You must be really wrong.
No, the ESP as in...
The European Skeptics Podcast.
That's right. And if you're wondering how you can find us online, go to theesp.eu.
And you can also find us on Twitter at espodcast_EU, or you can like us on Facebook.
And if you want to subscribe, do a quick search on all the intertubes for the European Skeptics Podcast. You'll find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify and all the rest.
The European Skeptics Podcast.
The real ESP experience.
I don't know how you can believe.
I think we need to think. Here's Susan Gerbic.
I expect you to be here.
Where are we, Susan?
Hey, Richard, we're at in Berkeley at the community room at the Central Library.
Yeah, Berkeley Public Library.
Yes.
Which is a
Here.
big building. And it's you were saying it's a mix of the old and the new. We're in this meeting room, an empty meeting room because we're early.
Hear the echo?
Hello.
Hello.
And you're here today too?
I'm going to be doing a workshop. I'm speaking to the Bay Area skeptics, and this should be really interesting. I'm facilitating a workshop, so I'm not giving a talk. This is about how to have good discussions with people, how to come back into the world, meeting people in person, and having discussions about difficult topics. The goal is to become the person people come to when they have questions about strange things.
Ooh. I've got questions about strange things a lot of the time.
I feel a little silly doing this workshop in front of you and like Jeannie Scott and some of the other senior people.
I'm going to learn a lot of stuff.
Oh,
today.
no.
Yes,
I don't know. We'll see.
We always learn something. And I've been learning things because I've been watching your YouTube videos. Can you please tell the audience about the YouTube videos, especially centering on very well-known so-called mediums?
Yeah, so it's called Psychics Explained. That's my YouTube channel. I've had it about 2 months.
Link in this week's show notes.
Of course, you're the best. And what I'm doing is I'm breaking down psychic readings, mediumship readings in detail and explaining, because I think one of the things that we've been doing in the community is we've not done a well... You know, we're how do I say this? We're being kind of flippant about how we talk to people who believe in mediumship readings. They say, I've had a really great reading and there's no way they could have known this information. And we're just like, oh no, that's silly. Basically saying you're dumb, and you don't know what you're talking about and how silly you are. But I think that the readings actually do seem very realistic. If you're not like somebody who's done hours and hours and, tons of listening to mediumship readings like you and I have, you don't hear the tricks. You don't see it.
Well, it's the old analogy with a stage magician. When you go to see a stage magician and the rabbit appears and the woman is sawn in half or whatever the case may be, if you don't know the trick, you're blown away. Now, if you go to somebody who says they can contact your dead relatives and they appear to do so and you don't know the psychological and sometimes, frankly, outright cheating, then you can be blown away. And it's the old adage, we don't blame the victim.
Right. We shouldn't blame the victim. We should be looking and explaining it to them in some sort of detail. And that's what I do on my channel is I break down the reading. I explain. A lot of it's wordplay, because most psychics do cold reading. So,
most, yeah.
Yeah, so what we're able to do is look at how they said the words and then think about how they said the words to make it sound like they were being specific, but actually they were just being very vague.
As far as we're concerned, it's the old story, because we've been dealing with this, well, frankly, for decades.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, Richard, is I'm the only female, I think, that's doing this. And I've looked into this for years. All the researchers and psychics have been male.
Well, there's Lynn Kelly, of course, in Australia, who wrote the book, The Skeptic's Guide to the Paranormal. I think that's the name of her book. And she's an expert on cold reading and psychic reading.
I didn't realize that. And I know Lynn Kelly.
Yes.
I think of her as the person who deals with Stonehenge and spiders. Yeah.
No,
I didn't really think that she
does. She studied with Ian Rowland, who wrote the book, The Full Facts Book for Cold Reading.
I didn't know that.
And I've known Lynn Kelly for years, and I've seen her many years ago in Melbourne. I was down for Science Week in Melbourne with the local skeptics down there. Hello to all the wonderful Melbourne skeptics. And Lynn set up a little table, and she was giving free so-called psychic readings. And people were gobsmacked. And she would have people saying, can I come back later for a private reading? Even though there were signs above her saying, fake, this is a trick.
Oh, yes, it happens all the time.
She's superb.
Now, that is something I didn't know. Well, I'm the only one on YouTube, apparently, that's doing this.
Interesting. And what exactly do you do in these videos?
So I'm explaining the video, trying to be kind to the people who are the
victims?
Well, the sitters. I guess we should call them the sitters, yeah. And they're there getting the readings, and the medium is doing their thing. And I'll stop and pause and say, did you hear that? Did you see how they did that? Did you see the words he used or she used, and how they're manipulating the sitter? Sitters are almost always female.
Yeah.
And I'll look at it and we'll just go through. If they're hot reading, which are some psychics that do hot reading, I will find the screenshots that prove they're hot reading.
And you do that by looking at their publicly available social media profile, right? Mm-hmm. And you can see where the medium might say, what's this about the two dogs who ran away or something like that? And you can find where this sitter has posted this very information some time back on their social media. Mm-hmm. So it's no surprise these psychics suddenly get this mystical insight about stuff that's already out there.
Absolutely. And we find that it's not as hard to find that you would think. You do not have to have a private you don't have to have a public Facebook page. You can actually find stuff on pages that are fairly open or using genealogy sites. But the psychics I deal with are doing maybe 10 minutes on a social media. It's really easy to find the things. And myself and my team, I have a team of people who do this, they're really good at it. And after a while, you just kind of get the feel of it and you know where to go. We go right to photos and we look for any photograph on somebody's posted that's black and white, sepia, or something from the 60s or 70s, you know, that kind of look to it. We go right to it, and most of the time it's exactly what the psychic has found.
Really? Mm-hmm. Really? Because that you're right, and it's just occurred to me as you're speaking, of course, it's not just details like posts like today I lost my dog or something like that. If they post photographs of their life and maybe from their own personal family, there's a wealth of information. A trip to Disneyland, for example, or at the beach, or whatever the case may be.
What we're finding is the person will put something up that's a remembrance of somebody. Oh, this is Mother's Day, this is Veterans Day, this is Father's Day, and here's my parents on their wedding anniversary. Here's my father coming home from the military. And you see those black and white photographs, and immediately there's some kind of post at the top saying, this is my dad, he was stationed here, and he did this, and he married my mom soon after, or whatever. And then in the comments of the family members, they're saying stuff like, oh, I remember what Uncle Joe, he did this, and oh my gosh, he used to take me fishing, and
so
it's right there.
The psychic in the reading will say, why am I seeing a man in uniform, and why am I seeing this particular state? Because that's information.
It's absolutely right there. And then they fill it in. The sitter fills in all the information. As soon, they can't wait to talk about themselves.
Yeah. And do you think that the modern medium maybe is a bit lazy? They don't have to do that much research. They just go to Facebook and whatever.
Absolutely. Mark Edwards says that these are the laziest psychics he's ever seen in his entire life. They used to have to materialize tambourines and have ectoplasm come out of their orifices and, dark seances. And now he says they just stand in front of a group of people and just say whatever. It's the laziest he's ever seen it. And social media has made it easy. Well, people tell me, they say, I shouldn't be on social media. It's another harm of social media. No, my Facebook page is public. Everything I do is public.
But it's mostly cats, isn't it?
And gardens. But the point is that you should just assume anybody who tells you something that you don't think they could have gotten from somewhere else, guess what? They got it from somewhere. So just assume, keep your Facebook page, your social media as open as you're comfortable with. It's already too late. You can't close it up because people's lives are in newspapers, they're on their other friends or family members, Facebook, social media. You cannot protect yourself from all this. It's there. So just be wary. And if somebody says, I'm contacting your dead whatever, just assume they got it from social media somewhere.
I'm just remembering the time that I wrote a little script for you, and you played a psychic called Goldie White. Do you remember that?
Oh my gosh.
And we were contacting a dead cat or something like that.
Oh my gosh, I got to go back and re-listen to that. Oh, those were so fun. They were just so fun, the different little scripts you would have us do. My favorite one, I think, was the Bermuda Triangle.
Oh, that's right, yes.
I think that's my favorite.
Listeners, if you go to the link on the Skeptic Zone homepage at skepticzone.tv, scroll down, and on the right of the page, you'll see Typewriter Time audio comedy. And there's a great one where Susan is a tour guide in the Bermuda Triangle, and I turn up to take one of your tours.
Over and over and over
again.
Yeah, they're so clever. I am not clever like that. You have such skills that I couldn't even think of doing. I have no skills in that area, but I sure do like my mediumship readings. I can pick out those things so fast and what's going on. I love doing that.
Well, I think there are some people just turning up at the door now, Susan. We better stop this and get ready for the workshop. But
oh yeah, this should be fun.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Earth is only 6,000 years old. That's what Answers in Genesis and the Creation Museum say. And how can a museum be wrong?
Isn't Dr. Oz just wonderful? I loved today's episode. It didn't talk down to his adoring audience of women at all.
Science has proved that the subatomic quantum realm is as real as it is counterintuitive and bizarre. Therefore, I can use it to support quantum healing and quantum consciousness. After all, how can journals like Aquarius Metaphysics be wrong?
Evolution is just a theory. After all, if we came from monkeys, then why are there still monkeys?
We all have friends and family who believe these things and much more. Well, if you're a rational thinker who is tired of arguing on social media and never getting anywhere, we have a solution for you.
Join the Guerrilla Skepticism and Wikipedia team, and we will teach you how to add reliable scientific and skeptical information to the world's #1 source of information, Wikipedia.
We write new articles and improve existing ones. We remove pseudoscience, paranormal, and alt-med claims, substituting the actual facts. And we operate in many languages.
We've already reached tens of millions of people searching for information, but as you can imagine, we can never do enough.
So please, join us. All you need is a PC and a desire to help educate the planet. In fact, you'll be educating the world while you sleep.
Contact us at gsowteam@gmail.com.
Guerrilla Skepticism. The time is now.
Music by purpleplanet.com.
And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham.
My name's Tim Mendham. I'm Executive Officer of Australian Skeptics Inc. and I'm also editor of our quarterly magazine, The Skeptic. And today I'm reading from the very first issue of The Skeptic magazine, came out 40-odd years ago. We've been around that long. From Volume 1, Number 1, which is from early 1981. And this is a story called Mass Hysteria. And it's by one of the Victorian committee members at the time, Dr Alan Christophers. And you can download this issue of the magazine yourself and have a read of it and all the exciting stories. And most of the issues from the last 40 years are available online for free on our website, skeptics.com.au. But okay, Alan says, students of the paranormal are familiar with claims of miraculous cures of disease where the improvement in condition is brought about by suggestion on the part of the healer. On the other side of the coin is a situation where diseases are generated by a process of suggestion. In the popular book from the 1950s, I think it was, The Story of San Michel by Axel Munter, himself a physician, tells how he incapacitated a rival by talking him into a disabling illness. The phenomenon arises perhaps more often amongst a group of people and is then usually called mass hysteria. These outbreaks of mass hysteria most often affect young adolescents. The symptoms complained of are those thought to be appropriate to the occasion. The patients often believe they suffer from poisoning or an infectious disease. Very often the outbreak is started by a trigger figure from whom the others copy the symptoms. The symptoms of the trigger figure are usually, but not necessarily, imaginary. One of these outbreaks occurred in Victoria in June last year, which was 1980. It involved about half of a group of 80 children from MacKillop College, Werribee, which is in Victoria, who were holidaying in the country area of Gippsland. The trigger figure in this case was an adolescent girl who had an attack of the hyperventilation syndrome, also known as panic breathing. The overbreathing is due to emotional causes, sometimes but not always in a panic situation. The symptoms are real and will develop in anyone who overbreathes. The symptoms in this case were photophobia, which is fear of light, blurred vision, feelings of hot and cold, and abdominal pain. Within a few hours, half of the children were sick. Many were plainly hysterical in the ordinary sense, but many had symptoms very similar to the trigger figure. The combinations of abdominal pain with feelings of hot and cold suggested an epidemic of infectious gastroenteritis from food poisoning. The outbreak had completely subsided as quickly as it arose, that is, within a few hours. At least some of these children following the trigger figure had genuine attacks of overbreathing, and these, no doubt, added a touch of authenticity to the whole proceedings. The next day there was no trouble, but a recurrence occurred next day when the children were returning to Werribee in 2 buses. The second attack occurred at Druin, a country town, where they had stopped for a short break. Again, it involved about half the children, mostly those involved in the first attack. There were at least a few genuine cases of panic overbreathing. Again, the attack subsided within a few hours. One of the girls was detained at Warrigal Hospital for a short time. Although the children were apparently well on reaching home, many were obviously apprehensive and wondering when they would fall victim to this mysterious disease. It is not surprising, therefore, that isolated attacks continued sporadically amongst the children over the next few days, and a number were admitted to hospital. Investigations by the Health Commission indicated that the outbreak could not have been due to any organic disease. As odd children were still succumbing, it became necessary for the Commission to reluctantly label the outbreak as hysteria. This diagnosis was resisted by the school authorities generally, and very fiercely resisted by parents, who would not believe that their children were hysterical. By coincidence, another attack of mass hysteria in children made headlines about a month later. This attack involved almost 500 children who were attending a carnival in Nottingham, England. The children in the jazz bands at the carnival started to collapse. Quote, they were just trembling all over and fainting. The hospital said that the symptoms were consistent with exposure to fumes of some sort, causing nausea, burning of the eyes, and a metal taste in the mouth. At first, poisoning by insecticide was suspected, but no traces of insecticide could be found. Eventually, expert medical opinion diagnosis also was strongly resisted by the band organisers and by the parents. It is typical of media reporting of such events that whilst the first account of the outbreak blaming insecticides was given headlines, the subsequent disclaimer was published in a short paragraph hidden towards the back of the paper. Mass hysteria requires for its generation a number of predisposing factors to set the stage. It usually requires a large collection, often of teenage girls, in a situation fraught with considerable emotional tension or excitement. The exciting cause is often a bad smell that suggests the presence of a poisonous gas, and the attack is usually precipitated by a trigger figure. This trigger figure may be someone more suggestible than the others, or maybe someone who happens to be genuinely ill, and I would add it might also be someone who likes to influence other people. Those who follow the trigger figure copy their symptoms from the trigger figure. Most often the outbreak subsides as quickly as it started, and this is usually associated with the removal of the patients from the situation they thought was responsible for their disease. If the outbreak is small, it often does not attract the attention of the media. If it is reported, it is usually ascribed to some poisonous agent. When further investigations reveals the historical nature of the illness, the media have lost interest and the true diagnosis is rarely revealed to the public. One could not be blamed for believing that there was a conspiracy of silence. The media are interested in reporting a poisoning, but are not so interested in reporting the final diagnosis that it was all in the mind. The patients and their parents are naturally unwilling to accept the fact that the illness was not genuine. Not to be forgotten are the medical practitioners who early diagnose some organic disease and who would look a little foolish by a revelation of the truth. Small outbreaks of mass hysteria are fairly common, but for the reasons given above, most of them are not publicised. The rather remarkable feature of the episode involving the MacKillop College children was that it gave the appearance of a mysterious infectious disease rather than a poisoning. For this reason, the outbreak was not cured by the return of the children to their homes. The children continued to wonder when they would be smitten by this mysterious disease. This state of mind was responsible for the persistence of isolated cases among the children after they returned home. It was this persistence of the outbreak which forced the Victorian Health Commission to divulge the unpalatable truth about the genesis of the outbreak. And that's from the Skeptic magazine, Volume 1, Number 1, which came out in early 1981. And you can download that issue of the magazine, it's only very small, from our website, skeptics.com.au, and you can download a lot of other issues of the magazine as well. And they're all for free.
ただいま聞いていただいているポッドキャストはオーストラリアからザ・Skeptic Zone という科学と論理のポッドキャストです。英語は世界中で数ある言葉の一つですが、このポッドキャストはいろいろな国の言葉で紹介します。www.skepticzone.tv を調べて、ホームページの下までにスクロールすると、折り紙のピガサスという翼のある豚を工夫した リッチャード・ソーンダスのオリジナルの折り紙のポスターをダウンロードをすることができます。
Once again to look into those pages at Trove, at trove.nla.gov.au, the online resource from the Australian Government and the National Library of Australia. You know it so well, where I go to find digital goodies, archived news reports from the past, simply numbering in their millions. A wonderful treasure trove of information and history indeed. Now, last week we were looking at Ogopogo, the Canadian lake monster. So this week I thought we would look into lake monsters from around the world. So I'm going to confine this segment to just one report. And this comes from the Canberra Times, dated the 3rd of November, 1990. Do dinosaurs still live? Hundreds will say yes. And this is a story by Paul Shore. And of course we bear in mind that this report was written 33 years ago. In this high-tech age of telescopic cameras, infrared night scopes, satellites, aerial surveys and sophisticated sonar, surely it isn't possible for any large mysterious creature to remain undetected. Surely dinosaur-like creatures cannot exist anyway. But it is highly likely they do. Strange monsters inhabit numerous lakes throughout the world, and not just Loch Ness. Unknown beasts have been seen at sea. Are these sea serpents? Do brontosauruses still exist in Africa? Is it possible that pterodactyls still fly our skies? The monster of the lake is probably the most witnessed and photographed of all unknown phenomena in our time. I'll break here and probably say possibly UFOs. Anyway, we read on. Most people who have seen such creatures are highly respectable. Surely not all of them were seeing things. In Lake Champlain in America, there is a monster called Champ. At least 91 people will tell you this is so. It has been described as having a long neck, a rather serpentine body, up to 9 meters long, and darkish skin. Champ scared the daylights out of a New York high society steamboat excursion in the 1870s when it surfaced nearby. The famous showman P.T. Barnum even put a $50,000 price on Champ's carcass. More recently, two skin divers, Maurice Lucia, I think that's pronounced, and Fred Shanafelt, were diving in Mendham Bay on Lake Champlain, searching for a sunken cabin cruiser when Lucia unexpectedly gestured for his partner to surface. Shanafelt, thinking there was some danger, surfaced with Lucia and, looking around, saw what had given Lucia such a scare. A huge monster, mushroom grey and at least 12 meters long, was swimming right beside them. Lucia said later, "It didn't make any effort to harm us. Once it cocked its head, as if curious about our appearance. I think we could have gone right back into the water without being hurt. Of course, I wouldn't have done that for $1 million. Manipogo is the name given to the monster, sighted in the Canadian lakes of Winnipegosis, I hope that's pronounced, and Manitoba. It has always been described as being slate grey with humps and a horn sticking out of its flat, snake-like head. When Manipogo rose in front of a large group of picnickers at Manitoba Park on the lake shore in 1960, there was instant, if hilarious, pandemonium. Grabbing their cameras, one woman rushed to the water's edge and promptly fell in. Another woman, camera in hand, rushed to her husband, but forgot to take a picture first. The designer of the park, Tom Lake, that's a great name for a designer of a park at a lake, I suppose. Tom Lake, who had a cine camera, which was like a movie camera, a cine camera with him at the time, calmly and coolly filmed the monster until it submerged. Then he discovered there was no film in the camera. Oh dear. Mr. R.A. Adams chased the creature along the shore and saw it joined by a mate and a baby monster. I wish I could have been there. Steve Rahaluk, his wife and 2 children, all got a good view too.
We were sitting at a picnic table. There was a ripple in the water. When I first looked, there was only one, but then I ran to the shore and I could see another beside it and a third trailing behind.
He thought they all looked like 3 black snakes. All in all, 17 people observed Manitogo and family that day, but no one got a picture. In Lake Okanagan, in Western Canada, there is yet another strange monster, Ogopogo, its name being derived from a music hall song. Actually, I'm not sure if that is correct with the name. Maybe I can delve into that later. In 1977, Mrs. Lillian Vogelgesang, I think that's pronounced, got a terrifying shock when her little daughter, playing by the lakeshore, began screaming. Mrs. Vogelgesang saw a 15-meter-long creature twisting and thrashing, water frothing around its humps, chasing fish close to the shore. It was olive green in colour, with glistening smooth skin and what looked like flippers. On another occasion, Erin Neely was water skiing on the lake when something dark and huge rushed past her, upsetting her from her skis. She said the creature was only an arm's length away while she trod water. When brought to the shore, she was taken to hospital for shock treatment. There is even a monster in Japan's Lake Ikeda. It has been described as vast and having 2 widely spaced humps. Issy, as the monster is called, and I hope that I've pronounced that correctly, has even had a special observatory built in its honour. Enthusiastic Issy supporters once poured sake into the lake, hoping Issy would become tipsy and come to the surface to frolic. Of course, the most famous of all the lake monsters is Nessie of Loch Ness, who has the distinction of having been sighted by more than 3,000 people. Nessie has been filmed, photographed, subjected to sonar scans and submarines, and has scared divers and fishermen, but has still remained mysterious and elusive. Loch Ness in northern Scotland is 39 kilometres long and up to 300 metres deep. Bordered by sheer mountains on one side, Loch Ness is an eerie and forbidding place, its waters constantly dark and murky. The first photograph of Nessie was taken in 1933 by Hugh Gray, a worker at the local British aluminium company. It was a Sunday after church when Gray took his usual walk along the loch.
The loch was like a mill pond, and the sun was shining brightly. An object of considerable dimensions rose out of the water not so very far from where I was. I immediately got my camera ready and snapped the object, which was 2 to 3 feet above the surface of the water.
A previously unreported encounter took place on July 22, 1933. Mr. and Mrs. George Spicer, on holiday in Scotland, were driving along a narrow road that ran beside the loch when they were suddenly confronted by an awesome sight. A 9-metre, bulky greyish creature with a 3.6-metre long neck came crashing out of the bracken on the hillside. Moving ponderously across the road, it plunged into the loch and disappeared. During that year, a flurry of sightings took place. The monster's description, though varied, always consisted of 2 humps, a long tail, and a snake-like head and neck that was usually seen protruding from the water. All these sightings brought worldwide publicity and floods of reporters, monster hunters, sightseers and researchers to the loch. In well over half a century, that flood has never really abated. Are all these lake monsters a type of surviving dinosaur? The most common theory is that Nessie and friends are plesiosaurs, a giant fish-eating reptile supposed to have become extinct 70 million years ago. Skeleton reconstructions of fossil plesiosaurs certainly fit many of the lake monsters' descriptions. Others believe that these lake monsters are giant eels or a race of monster worm-like amphibious creatures. Then, again, there's the notion that the lake monsters are a species of giant salamander, and that Nessie is a type of huge, shellless snail. Carl Hagenbeck, the great Hamburg zoo collector, heard many stories from explorers and natives of huge creatures, half elephant, half dragon, existing in the swamps of Africa. An expedition to Zambia discovered cave drawings depicting a giant sauropod dinosaur called Brontosaurus, or as it is now more correctly called, the Apatosaurus. And I think in the years since then, the names have changed a little bit again. Science marches on. And the story goes on a bit later to say, because it is quite a lengthy piece, if dinosaurs still inhabit lakes, then surely some of them would still dwell in the unknown depths of the sea. In the North Atlantic in 1959, two Scotsmen had a vivid sighting off the Isle of Sorey. One of the men was Tex Geddes, the other a holidaying engineer-inspector James Gavin. While fishing mackerel one fine day, Gavin noticed a strange black shape a couple of kilometres away. The object appeared to be getting closer all the time.
I'm afraid we both stared in amazement as the object came towards us, explained Geddes afterwards. For this beast steaming slowly in our direction was like some hellish monster of prehistoric times. The head was definitely reptilian, about 2.5 feet, 75 centimetres high, with large protruding eyes. I would say we saw 8 to 10 feet, 2.5 to 3 metres, of the back in the water.
A similar strange creature dramatically appeared in the middle of a U-boat action. U-boat U-28, or we could say U-boat U-28, under the command of Captain Georg von Forstner, had just sunk a British cargo steamer. The steamer sank quietly. Then there was a violent underwater explosion, followed by pieces of wreckage and a writhing, struggling, gigantic sea animal erupting out of the water. Von Forstner described the creature as being
like a crocodile in shape. It had 4 limbs with powerful webbed feet and a long tail tapering to a point.
Even Australia can boast its own sea serpent. In December 1964, a Frenchman named Robert Lee Sirac, who lived on Hood Island in Queensland, was taking his family across Stonehaven Bay in a small motor cruiser. They came across what looked like a floating tree. As they approached it, Lee Sirac observed that it had a vast eel-like body. Hastily, he took his family back to shore. Then, accompanied by a diver named Hank de Jong, Le Sirac went back to where he had seen the injured monster, which he hoped to film. The creature had a huge head and a large mouth crammed with small teeth. Its body had no scales, had a pointed tail, and was some 21 metres in length. The creature had a gaping wound in its side and had probably come into the shallow waters of the bay to escape sharks. As Lee Sirac was filming the creature, it slowly slid off into deeper water. Way back in 1890, a school teacher named Miss Lovell reported seeing off the Queensland coast a creature half turtle and half fish, some 9 metres in length. The local Aborigines had always known of such a creature and called it a Mahama. I think that's pronounced. For those of you who wish to know, that's spelt M-O-H-A-M-O-H-A. The oceans cover at least 2/3 of the world's surface, and their depths are some of the least explored areas in the world.
There have been numerous sightings and collected evidence supporting the existence of giant squid and octopi, as well as sea serpent. So it is also possible that dinosaur-like creatures lurk in the oceans. Stranger things have happened at sea. And we get to the conclusion of the report. Could so many people who have claimed they have seen sea monsters, brontosaurus, pterodactyls, and lake creatures like the Loch Ness Monster be wrong? It is true that a number of recorded sightings are due to mistaken natural phenomena or hoaxes, like the one where a Yorkshire zoo owner managed to fool everyone for a day or so into believing that one of the dead elephant seals was a basking Nessie. But the overwhelming statistics of sightings, collated with what evidence there is, point strongly to the fact that strange creatures, possibly remnants from the dinosaur age, inhabit the unplumbed depths of lakes and oceans and unexplored waters of the earth. Until recently, only a small number of scientists and zoologists were inclined to be involved in proving the authenticity of these mysterious creatures. Now, full-scale expeditions armed with the most modern equipment are occurring. If these continue and persevere, it may not be too long before we know for sure that some dinosaurs do exist. Well, as we said before, this is from 33 years ago. And thus far, despite the best efforts of monster hunters, cryptozoologists, and dedicated scientists, regardless, not one of these mysterious creatures has come to light. What a fascinating topic it is, cryptozoology in general, and in this case, sea and lake monsters in particular. The mysteries of the deep. And you can explore those mysteries for yourself in the pages of Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, because when you dive into those mysteries, you never know what you might find.
Thank you for listening to The Skeptic Zone, and thank you to Dr. Eugenie Scott and Susan Gerbic for their wonderful interviews this week. Thank you to those people who continue to support The Skeptic Zone at skepticzone.tv via Patreon or PayPal. Much appreciated, and of course necessary. And thank you to those people who have just come on board to be sponsors as well. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from quite near San Francisco. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. Hello to the people who listen after the music in hopes of an Easter egg. Yes, you get an Easter egg this week. At this large wooden table here, and I do have a D10, a 10-sided die, so we'll play the dice game. For those of you who don't know, this is where you use your magical predicting power, or dumb luck, and see if you can predict what number will come up on the die. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10. We'll roll it 3 times. Where's my Skeptic Zone pen? Here it is. Where's my Skeptic Zone note paper? Here it is. Otherwise known as a pen and a note paper. Roll number 1. Concentrate now, concentrate. Here it comes. 5. There you are, Susan Gerbic, just for you. Roll number 2. Concentrating, predicting. Here it comes. 7. 5, 7, and the last one coming up. Shake the dice. Here it comes. 2. This week's numbers in the dice game are 5, 7, and 2.